Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing a doll movie review and taking a look at Monster High New Ghoul at School. This was the first Monster High movie back in Gen 1, and it also, as far as I know, is supposed to serve as kind of like a prequel to the webisodes. So if you saw my review on the webisodes, you might know that I didn't love the show, and so I really wasn't expecting to like this movie, and spoiler alert, I was right, wasn't a really big fan, so if you just wanted a very short positive or negative, there's your answer. I had a negative experience with this movie. That's not to say that I am not excited for movies in the future. I am still really excited to kind of continue this series and continue watching more Monster High media. I knew going in that I probably wasn't going to like it because, like I said, it's like a prequel to the webisodes, which I didn't enjoy. So out of all the movies, this is probably the one that I expected to like the least. So not liking it didn't make me super disappointed or anything, or less excited for the future movies. It's just kind of one that I had to get through to get to the other ones that I'm more excited about. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Monster High New Ghoul at School today. Before I get into all the reasons why I didn't like the movie though, I obviously have to give my usual set of disclaimers. The first one is, as always, this is just my opinion. If you really love the movie, that is totally fine, and I'm not saying that I didn't like it as a personal attack against you. It's just my own opinion. Then, just like the webisodes review that I did, I will not be using clips from the show. I'll be using screenshots instead. I'm just really nervous about copyright. I haven't had any copyright problems yet, knock on wood, and I know the first time I decide to go ahead and use clips, I'm gonna get hit. Like, that's just the kind of luck that I have, so I am sorry. I'll try to make it as exciting and as engaging as possible and try to, like, help you guys know what I'm talking about with the still images, but I'm just too nervous to use clips. I also should say, if you're like I was up until very recently and you haven't seen this movie, I am not going to be like putting spoiler warnings or anything like that because it's like a decade old. So this is serving as your spoiler warning if you haven't seen it already and you do plan to. Go give it a quick watch really quick before you finish this video. And lastly, if you do find yourself enjoying, if you could give the video a like, that's very helpful to me. And if you enjoy your time here and you haven't subscribed yet, definitely subscribe so that you can see more. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and start talking about this movie. First of all, I want to talk about all the characters that stood out in my mind aside from Frankie. Frankie is the main focus of this movie, so she's going to get like her own section, but I did want to just take a second to talk about the other characters that actually managed to grab my attention. First up is Laguna. She's only in a couple of scenes, like I literally think she has 2 scenes that she appears on screen, but during the few moments that she is on screen, I really enjoyed her character. I think she's a really good listener when Frankie needs her to be, and she gives Frankie really good advice, even if Frankie doesn't listen to her. And overall, Laguna just gave me really, really good vibes. Then there was Draculaura, and she's not my favorite character in the movie. I don't know exactly what it is. I spent a long time trying to pinpoint what it was about her character that was kind of grating to me, but I can't pin it down. She just is kind of irritating to me at sometimes. That being said, I do think that she is a fantastic friend to Frankie. Draculaura is the only person to go up to Frankie and start a conversation like it's no big deal at all, and I think that Frankie really appreciates that. And also, just as someone who is extremely socially anxious and introverted and really bad at talking to people, I love being around people like Draculaura for whom it is so easy to have a conversation, because it just alleviates that nervousness when the other person is having such an easy time of it, you know? So I could appreciate Draculaura in that way, because I think that even though sometimes she wasn't my favorite character, she was a really, really good friend to Frankie in the movie. Then there was Cleo, and she was pretty interesting. Again, not necessarily like on screen the most, but when she was on screen, I found her pretty compelling. There are a few moments where she kind of lets down her very confident facade and is a little bit more vulnerable, and I really, really enjoyed those few precious seconds. I'm hoping that in future Monster High movies that I watch, we get to see more of that, because I just think it's a really compelling aspect of Cleo's personality. But those are all the characters that I wanted to talk about, aside from, again, Frankie. The movie is only like 30 minutes long, so movie is a very loose term, I think, so definitely not a lot of screen time for a lot of characters to grab my attention. I know I didn't cover everyone else who's in the movie, but I did cover everybody who made some sort of impression on me. Again, save for Frankie. Frankie was literally unbearable to me in this movie. Again, it has an extremely short runtime, and while I was surprised by that, I was also really grateful because it meant that I didn't have to deal with Frankie's nonsense for too terribly long. I don't think I could have dealt with her nonsense for too terribly long. The whole plot of the movie is about Frankie trying to fit in as the new ghoul at Monster High and trying to make friends, and I guess it's a perfectly fine premise. I'm sure it's very relatable to kids and teens. So, like, I don't have a problem with the, like, plot. Well, I do have issues with the plot, but we'll get to that in the next section. But I don't have an issue with the idea of the plot, I'll put it that way. It's just that Frankie herself was terrible. Every single thing she does seems like the worst possible thing to do in that given situation. I do understand that being only like a couple weeks old at this point that the movie takes place, Frankie doesn't have a lot of social practice, and so I understand that in social situations she might very well feel out of depth. But in non-social situations, when it comes to like intelligence and common sense and logic, there's no reason for Frankie to not be able to think things through. I mean, she's obviously developed enough in that way to be able to even be allowed to attend Monster High. So, like, I can give her a pass for social situations, but in all of the other aspects in which she just does the wrong thing or does the dumb thing or whatever she does in that situation, there's not really a reason for it, and that's why it bothers me. So while Frankie is trying to make friends, she tries a lot of different tactics, and one that I wanted to use as an example is she joins the swim team. Now, Frankie, being Frankenstein's daughter, has like electric powers, and so she gets in the pool and promptly electrocutes the entire swim team. And if this weren't a made-for-kids movie, the swim team would have been dead. Like, assuming that they're not already ghosts or zombies or like any undead sort of monster, they would have become an undead sort of monster because they all got fried. And it's just so irritating because it's like, why didn't Frankie think of that? Why didn't she know that? Like, I feel like she's portrayed as a fairly smart monster, again, when it comes to things like outside of social situations. So there's no real reason that she couldn't have predicted that she was about to almost kill her classmates going into the pool. It was just really dumb. And then even worse, this was the worst one for me, so I have to use this as another example, is Frankie decided that a great way to kind of get together with other monsters and start to make friends with them would be to volunteer and do some sort of charity work with them, which is a good idea. You know, like, that's wholesome. It's good to be doing anyway. And then also it can be a good way to make friends. So, like, that makes sense. So she sets up this little booth and she's getting like signatures to support a cause. And when she's asked about what the cause is, she just doesn't have an answer. And it's just so stupid. Like, there's no way that she didn't think, oh yeah, I should probably actually have a plan to follow through with this, because how is she going to make friends if she's just getting names on a list, right? Like, there has to be some sort of end game where she actually does some volunteer work or like a charity event or something. So why didn't she plan it through? It's just so stupid and so insufferable and irritating. Oh my gosh, that scene made me want to pull my hair out. I was so angry watching that. Like, I do understand that for the sake of the movie, Frankie needs to try and fail to fit in. I just feel like there has to be a better way to have executed that. The other thing about Frankie is that she lies literally constantly. She's maybe honest for like 1/3 of the movie tops, if I'm feeling generous. She genuinely has one neutral positive interaction with Deuce and then promptly decides that it would be a good idea to lie and say that he's her boyfriend, and I just don't understand the logic there. Like, I get that she wants to have friends, I get that she thinks it's popular to have a boyfriend, but again, what is the end game? Like, she doesn't have to be socially aware to know that it's probably not a good idea to be lying about someone being your boyfriend when you've spoken to them one time. Like, it's just so irritating. The other thing with Frankie that really bothered me is she seems to be willing to put in effort to make friends, but in all of the wrong ways. There's one instance where her and Draculaura and Claudine are talking and they're kind of like, yeah, we should hang out sometime, and then Frankie realizes that she doesn't have their phone numbers, so she can't text them to be like, hey, we should hang out. And she just doesn't ask for their phone numbers. Like, it's one sentence. She could have literally just said, oh, yeah, I'd love to hang out, don't have your phone numbers, what are they? That's it. That's all it would take. But Frankie can't put in that effort. And, like, I understand that it's awkward and it's anxiety-inducing. Again, I'm not good in social situations, okay? So, like, I understand where Frankie's coming from in that respect. But Claudine and Draculaura, in this instance, have already said that they're interested in being her friend, right? Like, it's not like she's coming up out of the blue and asking for this. They're already like, yeah, we get along, like, we could hang out. So I don't feel like it should be that hard for her to ask for their phone numbers. So she's not willing to put in the effort in that situation where it would be really easy to, like, seal the deal, you know, and make friends. But she's willing to go through fear-leading tryouts and a whole interview that she has to prepare for with Cleo to try to make friends that way. It's just, it's so weird what she chooses to put effort into, and it feels like she gets right up to the point of making friends and then just doesn't put in the effort or completely bungles it by putting in the effort to lie about it. to the point where it almost feels like Frankie is like manufacturing these situations for herself instead of them being real problems that she's facing. Basically, I really didn't like Frankie.
Hi, editing me here. One thing that I wanted to add on really quickly about not liking Frankie is that I think it was especially weird because Frankie, as the main character in this movie, is someone that the audience should feel sympathetic for. She's not framed as like a bad main character or like you're following the villain of the story. You are meant to feel sympathetic to her. And so I think it's weird that the setup of this movie means that we are supposed to feel bad for a character who at best is accidentally hurting people and at worst is actively lying to all of her classmates. It just was weird to see them try to make me root for someone who is inherently so unlikable, in my opinion.
Like I said, the whole plot of the movie is fairly simple. Frankie is new both to being alive and also being in high school, so she reads magazines for advice and tries harebrained schemes to try to make friends. She does end up on the cusp of succeeding because she does well at fear-leading tryouts and then has to do an interview with Cleo to kind of actually make the team. Only at the interview, in an effort to seem cool, she says that she's dating Deuce because she doesn't know that Cleo and Deuce are dating and just completely ruins pretty much everything. She then makes it up to Cleo, apologizes, and says that, like, this was the whole situation and kind of explains it to her. And then to actually kind of get back into Cleo's good graces, she invites Justin Biter, a musician, to come and play, I think at the school. The location was ambiguous, but it doesn't matter. She invites Justin Biter to play for Cleo, and they have a little concert, and everything is like a nice happy ending. So now I am going to talk about the problems that I have with this plotline. For one, Frankie knows Justin Biter, who is basically just Justin Bieber, who at the time that this movie came out was a heartthrob to teenagers everywhere. So, like, that's a pretty big deal that she has this connection to Justin Biter. I think that her dad knows him, so she's not, like, close, but she knows him, right? Even though Frankie has very little social practice and therefore very little social knowledge, she does read magazines like an absolute fiend, and so there's no way that she doesn't know how significant it is that she knows, or at least has this connection to Justin Biter. It doesn't make sense to me that she wouldn't just say that to someone. Like, in high school at the time, you know, if you had been like, hey, I have this connection to Justin Bieber, you would have been flocked to by people who have questions and, like, want to get to know you. So Frankie, in this fictional movie setting, could have done the same thing, just being like, oh yeah, by the way, my dad knows Justin Biter. And people would be absolutely foaming at the mouth to try to get to know her. Maybe not for, like, the best reasons necessarily. But given everything else that happens in this movie, I don't think that that's really, like, an issue. I think it's just baffling that there's this really simple solution to Frankie's problem that is right in front of her, and she just doesn't use it. I do get that for the sake of plot, Frankie can't just take the easy way out and, like, say, hey, I know Justin Biter, and kind of start talking to people and therefore make friends that way. But I think that it is bad writing that the simple solution is there at all. I hope that that makes sense. Like, if that simple solution doesn't exist, or she doesn't have reason to know that it exists until later in the movie, then everything else that happens before the ending is plausible. But when Frankie reads magazines, so she definitely knows how popular Justin Biter is, and, like, I think that she's intelligent enough to where she could glean that that would be some sort of information that she could use as a social lubricant. It makes the whole movie pointless. Like, it's a movie for the purpose of being a movie, but the story it has to tell is rendered completely useless by the time you get to the end. I hope that makes sense. It just really bothered me that basically this movie could have been 2 minutes long, and instead it was 30 minutes long. The other thing that felt weird about the plot was that it covered fear-leading tryouts. Not so much the way that it covered them, but the fact that it covered them at all. Again, this movie is, as far as I know, supposed to be a prequel to the webisodes. So it's weird to me that the movie had Frankie trying out for the Fear-Leading Squad, when in the webisodes she also has to try out for the Fear-Leading Squad. I know you could say that, like, oh, she just didn't technically make it the first time, but to me that doesn't really explain it away. In the movie, Frankie seems to have a little bit more skill at fear-leading. She's not perfect, but she seems a lot more skillful than she does in the webisodes, and Cleo is actively interested in getting her on the squad to the point where she grants her an interview, whereas in the webisodes, Cleo is, like, so angry when she has to bump Frankie up from being a, like, backup member to a full-time Fear-Leading Squad member. So the characters around Frankie act as though these are two separate situations, even though they're the exact same situation. And I do know that Monster High technically has a lot of different canons. Like, I don't expect every single piece of Monster High media to be perfectly interconnected, because there's the show, there's all kinds of different movies, there's different generations, there's the dolls, there's books. There are a lot of different potential canons for Monster High. So, like, I wouldn't necessarily be upset if the books covered Fear-Leading Tryouts and then the movies handled it differently. But when these two particular pieces of media, this movie, New Ghoul at School, and then the webisodes, are supposed to be kind of inextricably linked, it bothers me that they cover the same material twice in like two different ways, because it just doesn't make sense. And honestly, even beyond it not making sense to me, I think it's just a really boring decision to decide to do the same thing twice. Like, it just lacks excitement, which, to be fair, is consistent with every other part of this movie. Okay, we're on the last section of this review, and I want to talk about the format and style choices made in this movie. There are a lot of weird ones that kind of range from odd but understandable to absolutely baffling and weird. So kind of going from least to most unhinged. We're going to be starting off with what they choose to animate in different frames. I'm almost certain that this is like a budget thing, so I do understand it, and I guess it's less of a critique than it is just something that I noticed and therefore wanted to talk about, because I just like to talk about things. But you can really tell that there was a low budget for this movie based on how the animation is done. Sometimes there are like reused sequences or frames, and like there's that. But honestly, what made me notice it the most was what's included in different frames. The best example I can give for this is the Fear-Leading Tryouts scene, where Cleo and the Fear-Leading Squad do like an example routine so that Frankie can try to copy it and they can see how well she does. And it's like half the time that they're doing this routine, it's just hands or feet on the screen, like they aren't animating the whole bodies. Again, I am just assuming, so like I don't know this 100% because A, I didn't work on the movie, and B, I'm not an animator, so I don't know the ins and outs. But I'm assuming that it's a lot easier to animate a set of tapping feet, especially when every single foot is wearing the same pair of shoes, than it is to animate whole bodies. So like, I get that it's a budget thing, and I'm not necessarily complaining with this one in particular. It's kind of just unfortunate because I think that the lower budgets and therefore the things that we get to see on screen, because, again, I'm assuming, but because of that lower budgets, make the movie overall feel really uninteresting visually. Then there were the character title cards. So every time a new, like, important character was introduced, after they had, like, a speaking line or two, or sometimes before, they would flash up on screen a title card with just a still image of the character and their name and, like, a little slogan underneath. And I guess this is supposed to be to help kids understand who each character is, but honestly, even that I think is being too generous. There are plenty of kid shows that don't rely on this really outright sort of introduction for each character to explain who everyone is, and kids seem to manage to watch those just fine and understand what's happening just fine. So like, I just don't understand what the purpose of these was. I don't think that it was harmful. It was ultimately kind of a non-issue within the movie. Like, it didn't really have any effect on what was happening on screen. It didn't really like make me feel anything. I think it was just a odd thing to decide to include, and I feel like it's only a couple of seconds that each title card is on screen, but given the very limited runtime of the movie, I feel like surely there was something else that they could have done that would put that time to better use. Next, I want to address the narration. The movie is set as happening in the past, with Frankie actively narrating over what you see on screen, as though she's either telling the story in the future or kind of writing it in her diary. And I don't have a problem with that format overall. It can be done perfectly well. It's not a new type of format. Like, it's a fairly normal thing to do in movie making, but the problem is that Frankie narrates so much that it removes any sort of surprise. Literally the second that a scene ends, Frankie's voice will like kind of appear over, you know, a little backdrop shot, and she'll tell you exactly what's going to happen in the next scene, to the point where it's just like, what's the point of watching the movie if you're going to tell me this? You know, I understand that the narration could be a cool tool in a Monster High movie specifically, because Monster High really does have a lot of connection to stuff like diaries. In G1, the diaries are how you got to know the characters, and then even in the G3 cartoon, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard that they like talk to little crystal balls and kind of record their thoughts as like a audio or a video diary. So I do think that the narration could have been used in a good way, because I think that for Monster High media. It fits in well with other pieces of Monster High media. But Frankie just over-narrates so much to the point where the entire movie just lacks any sort of suspense or surprise or interest, because it's already an extremely predictable plotline, and then to have her narrating on top of it, it just really, really made it fall flat. And then lastly, we come to what I can only describe as the music videos. I do wish that I wasn't so nervous about copyright so that I could show you these clips, because wow, are they something. But as it is, I can only urge you to go watch the movie if you don't know what I'm talking about. So the first one comes up after Frankie has tried to join a bunch of different clubs to make friends, and she has failed at successfully integrating into all of them. Some sad music plays, and some darkened shots of Frankie are on screen where she's just kind of walking through the halls in a dejected manner. And it's just so weird. I feel bad to laugh, but it's so bizarre and so out of place. Like, you obviously can use music in a movie to set tone, and I would argue it's one of the most important ways that you can set tone in a movie and show that the audience should be feeling a certain way. But it felt so out of place with the rest of the movie, and it was just so weird and jarring to watch that it completely took me out of what little immersion I was experiencing, and it made me laugh rather than feel bad for Frankie. I was already having a hard time feeling bad for Frankie, but the way that they portrayed this literal music video moment was so ludicrous that it was impossible to actually feel sympathetic for her in that moment. It was just kind of comical. I think the best way to put it is that this sort of music video moment isn't something that I would be upset by if I were watching fan-made music videos on YouTube or edits on TikTok, because I kind of expect that. It's a little bit amateurish, but I think in the right setting, that amateurish tone is kind of appealing and kind of sweet and kind of endearing. But when you see it in a professional movie, it's not. It's not any of those things. And then the best part is that they did it again. After Frankie completely bombs her interview with Cleo and also temporarily ruins Cleo and Deuce's relationship, the same song plays with some of the same reused shots of Frankie just walking the halls, lonely and sad. It's just so ridiculous. I think the first one was weird enough, but doing it twice with the same song was just absolutely baffling to me. I could not believe that this got approved, especially given that the show has such a short runtime. Taking up that time, precious time, to do two of the same music video shots was a weird decision, to say the least. So yeah, to sum up my thoughts on Monster High New Ghoul at School, it was weird and bad. I do think there's only one more 2D animated movie before I get into the 3D animated ones, so I'm going to get through that one next, but I have to be honest, I'm mostly excited for the 3D animated ones, just because I know for sure that those have a longer runtime, and so I'm hoping that they'll have more, opportunities for plot development and character development. So I do really think that there's going to be at least one movie out there in the future that I like, but this one was just not it. So again, I do apologize if I bash something that you're a fan of. I promise it's not personal, I just can be kind of critical at times. But regardless of how you feel about the movie, I do hope that you could enjoy this video. I do hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day or your night or whatever it might be, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye guys!